We have one more guest here tonight, so please join me in welcoming the Senior Vice President of Corporate Affairs for Danone, Gemma Hart. Hi.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us.
Great pronunciation.
Thank you. We had a long conversation about that, how to pronounce Danone.
And when people say, you mean Danone? I'm like, no.
And that's a communication and brand challenge in and of itself, I would imagine.
Yeah, there is a whole story there. I don't think we'll go there now.
Well, pronunciation is important because it does highlight kind of the global nature of your company.
Yes.
And you oversee North America, which is the biggest market, but you're headquartered in Paris.
That's right.
So talk to me about the global nature and the challenges that it might create for communication, again, kind of given the external context that we're all working through.
Sure, happy to. So maybe I should just start with like a little bit of background and context on Danone so you understand how we in North America fit into the global picture. So as Eleanor said, you know, large global food and beverage company, and then we in North America are the largest part. We're about 30% of the revenues, and we're very well known for the yogurt part of the business. We're the number one player in dairy. We're also, to people's surprise, the number one in plant-based, right? So if you think about silk and plant-based milks, that is all of ours. We have a waters part of our business, which is a brand like Evian. And then we have a specialized nutrition medical part of the business that includes baby food. And it's an interesting one because depending on where you are in the world, you get more or less of those different parts of the business. So we are very heavily in the dairy and plant-based part of the business. Danone is a really, I think, pretty unique scaled food company because of our heritage and where we've come from. So over 50 years ago, our then CEO made this sort of seminal speech where he said, our responsibility does not end at the factory gate or the office door. And so that sense of delivering business performance, yes, and using our business as a force for good. And this is sort of, it's central to who we are and therefore how we show up in North America or around the world, because that governance structure, which means that we have an obligation to our stakeholders, is embedded in our business globally. And so, you know, people don't get very excited about the G in ESG, right? But in our case, it is critical and it's something that sets us apart and then also lays the foundation for how we communicate around the world and how we do that in a really consistent way. And so we are one of the world's largest B Corps. You have to certify legal entity by legal entity. So next year, we will be 100% certified globally. We're a public benefit corporation. But these are the things that are then at the root of how we show up as a company, what our values are, and what we think sets us apart. So then to your point around North America versus global, we have the same North Star, right? So our mission is bringing health through food to as many people as possible. And Katie touched on this, and I think this is going to be at the root of a lot of conversations. We understand what our role is in the world, right? We understand what we stand for, what our values are, and then how we bring that to life in North America is obviously through maybe programming that brings a lot of our commitments to life, and also then how we talk about it in a context and in a way that lands with a North American audience, which is different, right, from a European audience.
What's the biggest difference, would you say? What are some considerations you might have to make that your peers don't abroad?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing is that we're listed, our primary listing is in Paris, right? So we contribute through all of our planning and preparation to our earnings, right? So I do a lot of work with our leaders in North America in helping prepare for our piece of the earnings, but we don't own it, right? So there's a process there that's very important where we know our piece, but we don't know the bigger picture. And so we have to be very careful in what we're doing in North America so that we don't overstep, that we don't signal something that we shouldn't, right? What we do in North America is material to the global business. So there's just a lot of coordination with our global colleagues. It's a really interesting one because when I think about some of our company commitments, a lot of them obviously come to life in the region. And because we're North America, we also lead in a lot of innovation. And so we can often be leading the way, but we need to do it in a way that's very sensitive to not just our stakeholders, but our global stakeholders as well.
I wanted to ask the same question that I asked Katie earlier, which is around kind of the decision tree matrix, how and when to respond to certain issues. How do you look at that as the head of corporate affairs? What are some considerations that you all make? Do you have a decision tree? Has it evolved? Give us the lowdown.
Yes, we have a decision tree. I thought Katie made a really good point. We have the decision tree, but it's so critical to have the right people in the room to be having the right conversation. Like, we're not kind of like blindly following the decision tree. Sometimes there are things, extenuating circumstances, that mean that you don't always follow it, right? But in that context, we do have the tree that starts with, is this topic relevant to our business? Right? Is this something that actually is relevant to us as a company and to our stakeholders? Right? So we're in the business of making healthy food and beverages. And with that comes, a huge supply chain from farm to table, right? So is what's happening relevant? Is it relevant in the outside world? Is it just relevant internally? That's the first one. Second, do we have the right to talk about this? And some of that comes with, do we have the substance, right? Is this, are these topics where we have the right planning, programming, the right strategy, and we could make a difference, right? That we can make a difference in the world by speaking up. We also look at, which of our stakeholders is this most relevant to? And then we start looking at, if we were going to say something internally or externally, what would that look like and how would that play? And there's also the global lens, because we have, topics that are extremely pertinent in North America that are, I think, less top of mind in other parts of the world. So we have to be sometimes a little careful in how we navigate that.
The decision to overturn Roe v. Wade was one of those, right? And you mentioned that was something that you all discussed.
Yes.
Can you fill us in on that?
Yes. So we are a company that's focused on health, right? Our mission is bringing health through food. And we think about kind of the health of our food systems. And that's very deeply embedded in who we are as a culture. So as we all saw, Roe versus Wade coming, and, as communicators, we kind of had the benefit of some of a heads up on what the Supreme Court was going to do. We started looking at what that would mean to us, what the principles would be in terms of how we would manage that. And where we landed quite quickly was that as a company that focuses on health, we have a lot of credibility in health, and that this is where a lot of our authentic identity sits, that we couldn't not say something. What I want to be clear on is that then we were focused on access to reproductive health care, right? We were not taking a position on abortion, but it was, how do we, through that lens, articulate, kind of our brand values and what that then meant in the world and what it meant to our employees. Because, obviously there were changes that we, many of us then had to make to some of our different healthcare plans to make sure that our employees all had the same access to healthcare. And this was a topic where we did choose to speak externally. Like, Danone is, I think, a very humble company. We weren't shouting from the rooftops, but our CEO did post on LinkedIn about what we decided to do related to Roe versus Wade. And of course, then we did a lot internally. I think just to sort of complete the thought, there are other topics where we feel strongly. For example, any kind of violence or terrorist act, we will talk about it internally, but we will rarely talk about it externally because we don't necessarily feel like we have the same capacity to affect change.
This is going to be a big pivot, okay? So when we were talking earlier, you also, even tonight, you brought up that you are one of the biggest dairy producers in the globe, and specifically here. And for that reason, you said you are an expert when it comes to cow burping. Told you, a big pivot. So talk to me about methane, and obviously that must be a big issue for you all, how you all are navigating that and any communication challenges you might have there.
Yeah, it's a funny one. I never think that my mom's going to be so proud about me being on stage talking about cow burps and farts, right? But it is obviously very relevant to our business. So I think just some context, all of the work we do in driving the sustainability of our business is organized into what we call the Danone impact journey. And it is fully embedded into our business model, right? It's not something that sits off on the side. And it sits in kind of three different segments. It's health, right? The health of our portfolio. It's nature or planet, right? And how we help to drive sustainable food systems. And it's people and communities. So what you're touching on sits within our planet and nature segment of the Danone impact journey. And we have, very clear goals that we're looking to achieve as a global business. Right. So if you focus specifically on greenhouse gas emissions, we're looking to reduce them by 50% by 2030. And then within that, we have a specific focus on methane. And maybe I should just be clear on this. Methane is what cows emit when they burp or fart. Right. So we have all of these partnerships with hundreds of farmers in North America alone. And methane is a very noxious gas, right, that has an outsized impact on climate warming. So we have taken a leading global position on methane and how we understand how to measure it, how we build on farm practices, like all sorts of different things so that we can kind of attack this topic. And I think that what's really important for us, not just as it relates to methane, but generally in terms of our overall impact, is partnerships, right? We're a big scaled player, but we can't do it on our own. And so we have to bring our farmers along with us. As it relates to methane, we have a really great partnership with Environmental Defense Fund because they have a lot of expertise to bring to bear. We benefit from, and we also benefit from their independent perspective. And we have some really, there's just so many different ways where we're looking to innovate so that we can drive the sustainability of our business, right? The resilience of nature is the resilience of our business. So for example, we have a great partnership with a startup that's based in Hawaii, and they have a seaweed additive that we're currently testing in partnership with Cornell that they will feed different livestock. In this case, for us, it would be cows, so that it sort of helps them manage their digestion so that they're actually emitting less methane. And this is obviously critical, right, in terms of all of the journey that we're all on to try and reduce our impact on climate.
So as you're navigating all of this, right, how are you also safeguarding against this ESG backlash movement that we've seen?
I think that for me, it really comes back to like what makes sense for us as a business, right? What we're doing in terms of ESG it's our business strategy, right? We're a business that is reliant on nature, right? So if there's no dairy milk, there's no yogurt. If there's no soybeans, we have no soy milk. If there's no fruit, then we have no baby food. So this is, I think we're very fortunate because of the nature of our business that sustainability is our business. And so we have this very clear strategic framework. And, I think Katie was talking about, how they don't follow trends and that they're timeless. This for us is it anchors us. And it has for decades. And we have that heritage. So we're always referring back to, this is our strategy, this is our business, right? How can we affect change? And obviously, there is noise around all of us, especially in North America, but then we're very selective about where we lean in and where we respond. So it's not a knee-jerk reaction. I think the other thing I would like to say is that one of the reasons why it's so challenging these days is because of social media and the polarization, and often the polarization that comes with it through society. But I always say to our internal teams, like, social is not a proxy for the real world, right? It is some insight, right? You need the data. You need to be thoughtful about how you use that. But when there are issues happening, I think a lot of people are continuing with their normal life and taking their kids to school, right? They're not necessarily like crazily tweeting about it. So I think we have to be really just mindful and maintain perspective on, what, humans around you are feeling about the world. And sometimes things get really noisy and it's sort of actually just in one area.
And probably providing that context to leadership or your peers across the company too, right?
Yeah. I think maintaining that external perspective is one of the most important things that we do within communications and corporate affairs. I think it's hard. When you move in-house, you can often get caught up in the day-to-day of the business. And I think we have a huge responsibility to bring that external perspective and then also to take what we're doing internally and to translate it. I think we have a big role as translators, but translate it in a way that makes sense for external audiences and that resonates with them. It lands and it makes sense. And I think that a lot of what we're trying to do, especially on the ESG front, is big and messy and complicated. And how do we help break that into bite-sized pieces so that it's accessible for people?
Okay, I'm getting the wrap, but one fun thing, we've got to end it here. You all showed up in a big way in Paris for the Olympics.
Yes.
You were there.
Yes.
One fun thing from the Olympics. What can you share with us?
So Danone was sponsoring the Olympics in Paris. It was like our hometown. I'm told by our global team that through the course of the 2 sets of 2 weeks, right, Olympics and Paralympics, that we reached 15 million people, either with products, activations, like different outreach. That's kind of mind-blowing to me.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being such a great audience. Thank you to our sponsor, Weber Shandwick, for making this happen. And then if you want more of this, more opportunities to gather, more content focused on communicators, we do have our Communicators Pro membership that we are continuing to grow and expand. So if you have any questions about that, come find me later, grab drinks, mingle, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.